day 208 of the Trump administration. And on this day after the president spoke his mind on white supremacists and Nazis and their like, there was a palpable feeling among millions of citizens today that America took a step back this week. The office we normally look up to lift us up, provide moral leadership, instead has given hate groups the validation and recognition they have craved ever since the very first men to don a hood and light a cross. The president today stayed out of sight. He managed to escape New York. He's back at his New Jersey golf resort. We do have some new journalism to report on tonight, some of it coming out as we were coming on the air, that speaks to his state of mind and the state of this White House. Late tonight, Ashley Parker and Robert Costa of the Washington Post gave us this headline: Trump's lack of discipline leaves new chief of staff frustrated and dismayed. Of course, some of that was visible in real time yesterday as General Kelly kept his head down and seemed to wince more than once at what the boss was saying. Politico is reporting the president was left in good spirits, according to a White House advisor who spoke to him. The advisor said the president felt the news conference went much better than his statement on Monday. And more from the Associated Press just tonight, quote, the president told associates he was pleased with how his press conference went, saying he believed he had effectively stood up to the media, according to 3 people familiar with the conversations who demanded anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly about them. Business leaders felt differently. That brings us to the big blow the president did suffer today, and it was public. Put simply, for the first time in memory, a Republican president has been abandoned by leaders of big business. Members of the president's Manufacturing Council this morning decided they could no longer support him. They called the White House to dissolve the effort. The president, though, took to Twitter to create the appearance it was his idea. Quote, rather than putting pressure on the business people of the Manufacturing Council and Strategy and Policy Forum, I am ending both. Thank you all. Just the previous day, remember, he had written, for every CEO that drops out of the Manufacturing Council, I have many to take their place. Grandstanders should not have gone on. Jobs. Today, appearing with Nicole Wallace on our 4 p.m. Eastern hour, our 9 a.m. host, Stephanie Ruhle, a veteran of the investment banking business, was having none of the Trump claim that he decided to dismantle these business councils.
First of all, President Trump's tweet today that he dismantled the councils is a lie.
Right.
So we're going to walk through the timeline. Right. President Trump made those comments on Saturday. The CEOs were furious about it. By Monday, they had settled down because he restated, he warmed it up a little, and they didn't like it, but they said fine. By last night, they said enough is enough. Not because they're calling him a racist or a Nazi sympathizer, because these men and women have businesses to run. They're pragmatists. They're risk managers. They don't want to deal with this nonsense.
Many are now closely watching members of the cabinet and the Trump White House staff to see if there will be any resignations, to see if anyone will depart over principle from the president who equated the Nazis and white supremacists with those who had gone to Charlottesville to protest against them. No members of the president's Evangelical Council have announced their resignations. And the military's top service chiefs, the heads of all the major branches, have come out with statements condemning hate groups, underscoring inclusion in our armed forces. With increasing fear afoot that the president is pulling Americans apart, longtime journalist and author Jonathan Alter today said it has given rise to a new dynamic in this country.
You know, polarization has been a negative word, but now we're in an era of patriotic polarization. It's a question of which side are you on? Are you on the side of a toxic president who enables neo-Nazis and white supremacists? Or are you on the side of traditional American values, real American values of tolerance and kindness and respect? And so every politician ultimately is going to have to make a decision about whether they can continue to support this man.
Gets your attention. And just tonight, so did this. As one writer put it, blood and soil was met with amazing grace. The people in Charlottesville held a candlelight vigil. There's not a lot of great pictures of it, not a lot of media coverage on the ground, because they didn't want it widely known about in advance in case those same hate groups tried to enter their town and cause trouble on this night of remembrance. So with all that, we bring in our leadoff panel tonight. Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for The Washington Post, Eugene Robinson, MSNBC's chief business correspondent and our co-anchor on the daytime with Stephanie Ruhle, among others, Ali Velshi, and Boston Herald chief Washington reporter Kimberly Atkins. Ali, I have to start with you. We'll start in the business councils. We have news about Steve Bannon. We have news on several fronts. We'll get to all of it. These councils are a visual, usually. The president likes the visual because he likes being a member of that club. The CEOs like the visual, and sometimes they get real things out of proximity to the boss. But the lost visual to the president, being one of them, being seen as one of them, that was the loss.
These are his people. He's the businessman president. This is the stuff he said Barack Obama couldn't do because he was always at odds with corporate America and trying to overregulate them and overtax them, and he was going to fix it all. So number one, all of his friends have left him. Number two, he hasn't really delivered on the stuff that they wanted anyway. Number three, people have been asking me, how does this affect the average American? Probably doesn't, because those companies wanted lower taxes and less regulation. They didn't get it. Now they're not there. And number four, if the president ever needs to speak to a CEO of a major corporation or vice versa, they'll all find each other. They'll continue to do the business they're there for, but they don't want to show up for the photo op. A lot of them were already uncomfortable with it, and it made them much more uncomfortable after what happened on Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday.
Just a finer point on what Ali was just saying about President Trump, candidate Trump, the business guy. There's this. We'll continue our conversation.
One of the magazines said, Donald Trump's a world-class businessman. It's true. I happen to be. But I get along with everybody. You can't have fights. You got to get along. I built this incredible company, and I built it. I'm a deal maker. I did great. Really good. And I get along with everybody. I have the greatest deal makers in the world, the richest men, the richest women. I know the best managers. I know the best deal makers. I know the best people. We've got the best people. I have the best people. So we're going to get the best people. I know all of them. I know the good ones, the bad ones, the overrated ones. They've been calling me by the dozen. I'm endorsed by some of the greatest business people in the world. We're going to use our great business people to make these deals.
So fast forward to today. We now know what happened. And a distinction you have always made when you're here in this room with us, these CEOs have boards. They have multinational companies and tens of thousands of employees.
And shareholders and customers. And the group of them together all came together and said, you can't be associated with this guy. And today they were falling like flies. I mean, Campbell's Soup at one point, 3M. This is the Manufacturing Council. They were falling off. It is important to remember that while everybody doesn't feel great about the economy, unemployment is below 5%, and companies find it hard to hire people who will then move off, and it costs money. So these companies don't want their employees leaving. They don't want their customers leaving. Not for Donald Trump and not for a cause they don't believe in.
Eugene, I want to show the title of your latest column. It's something you have reminded us about. Trump's response to Charlottesville should surprise no one. He's fully baked. He's a 71-year-old man. But with that in mind, who do we see about this? Where does that leave the country, those who feel wounded after this episode?
That's a very good question. I try to figure it out every day. Where are we? We're in territory we haven't been in. As far you look back, somebody who seemed to want to turn back the clock on some of the social progress we've made. Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson resegregated the federal workforce in Washington. He showed the D.W. Griffith racist film Birth of a Nation in the White House and praised it and actually contributed to its popularity and its influence in American culture. And it's crazy that I'm going back for that analogy. But I'm trying to think of a more recent one, and I can't. I can't think of anything else that's brought us to this sort of point. But Donald Trump is who he is, and if you look at his record going back over years, back to the celebrated case here in New York of the Central Park Five, back before that.
Birtherism.
Birtherism. The beginning of his career, the lawsuit against him and his father for not renting to African Americans in their apartments in Queens. I mean, there's been an issue there. There's a recurring sort of pattern there. So maybe we shouldn't be surprised.
Kimberly, what do you think will will damage Donald Trump more. Party leaders, let's engage in fantasy, who turn against him someday, or business leaders who already have?
Look, this hurts, if for nothing else than the optics. As you pointed out, he has pegged himself as the CEO president who knows how to cut deals and bring business to the forefront, have a front seat at the White House, and all these business leaders walked out on him. Although these boards weren't meant to really do much policy, that does hurt. And the fact that they are speaking out more strongly against the president than Republican leaders right now is really remarkable. I think it will take Republican leaders to stand up. As you said, we can make believe a little bit, but to stand up and say, hey, look, we want to get infrastructure done too. We want to get tax reform done too. But you know what? Before you do that, before we come to the table on that, you issue an executive order condemning these groups. You devote more federal money to investigate the rise in hate groups in the United States, and then we'll talk to you. They have the power to do that, but you have to wait now just to see if they have the courage to.
A report on tonight, some of it coming out as we were coming on the air, that speaks to his state of mind and the state of this White House. Late tonight, Ashley Parker and Robert Costa of The Washington Post gave us this headline: Trump's lack of discipline leaves new chief of staff frustrated and dismayed. Of course, some of that was visible in real time. Just tonight, quote, the president told associates he was pleased with how his press conference went, saying he believed he had effectively stood up to the media, according to 3 people familiar with the conversations who demanded anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly about them. Business leaders felt differently. That day 208 of the Trump administration, and on this day after the president spoke his mind on white supremacists and Nazis and their like, there was a palpable feeling among millions of citizens today that America took a step back this week. The office we normally look up to lift us time yesterday, as General Kelly kept his head down and seemed to wince more than once at what the boss was saying. Politico is reporting the president was left in good spirits, according to a White House advisor who spoke to him. The advisor said the president felt the news conference went much better than his statement on Monday. And more from the Associated Press. Provide moral leadership instead has given hate groups the validation and recognition they have craved ever since the very first men to don a hood and light a cross. The president today stayed out of sight. He managed to escape New York. He's back at his New Jersey golf resort. We do have some new journalism